Hello, I'm Lauren from Wearing History. I am here with a video tutorial today to show you about e-patterns. Now, there's a lot of confusion about e-patterns. Some people don't realize that they are ones that you download yourself and you print off at home on your home printer. So I'm going to here to clear up a little bit of misconceptions and give you guys some tips. So we've been doing e-patterns for quite a long time. One of the first vintage companies, I believe, to start offering the download and print at home service. So I'm really pleased about that. A lot of people really love our e-patterns and I get really great reviews on how easy they are to use. So for those of you that don't know how to use them, this is for you. Now I think the people that usually like buying the e-pattern version are the people who live outside of the United States. So the shipping costs can be kind of high. And the people that are in a rush. So let's say that you have an event next weekend and you can't wait for me to ship your pattern, you want to get started tonight, then the e-pattern is for you. Now, I do need to give a shout out here because even though shipping from the United States to international locations is expensive, don't forget that I have a couple of stockists that are in Germany. So I have Poppy Ray Vintage, who stocks a lot of my awesome vintage patterns, and I have Nehelenia, I'm not sure if I say that right, who is in Germany, and she specializes in historical styles. So make sure that you go visit them on their websites to see if you can order my patterns if you're in Europe, if you prefer the printed version. But if you prefer the e-pattern version, you can order it from me. Now, I sell both my e-patterns on Etsy and on my website. So on Etsy, my store name is Wearing History, all one word. And my website is wearinghistory.clothing, C-L-O-T-H-I-N-G. So that is my web address for where to buy things directly from me. I like it when you buy directly from me because I don't get fees, but if you prefer Etsy, then that is always an option for you, and I'm very happy to sell on Etsy as well. So it doesn't really, I don't really care one way or another. I just want to make sure you guys are happy with your purchase. So the number one thing with e-patterns that you have to keep in mind is that they need to be printed to 100% scale. So when you print something at home, usually the printer dialog box pops up when you hit the print button and it will say fit to page. That's not what you want to do. You do not want to fit to page because when you do an e-pattern, you need to make sure that the scale is exactly the same across the board for every single page. It needs to be the scale that I designed the pattern in. So when you print your e-pattern, make sure that you select 100% scale or actual size. You do not want to format this in any way. You want it the way the original source material was prepared. So that is the number one thing. And when I get emails when people are like, my e-pattern doesn't line up correctly, almost across the board, it's because they didn't notice that they hadn't clicked the correct box. So when your printer thing comes up and it shows to print the e-pattern, make sure it's 100% or actual size, actual scale, something along those lines. It's a little bit different depending on what program you're using. Now, I'm going to say that when my patterns, some come in different files. So there will be multiple files that you will download. You will get one that I have prepared that is a README first file. Make sure you open that file. I know that when people download things, they don't often open the README file, but you have to open that file when you download from me because that is where I tell you how to print your pattern off and how to cut and align your pages. I made it for a reason. It's there to help you guys, so don't ignore that. The README first file, make sure you read it first. The next thing that you want to do is you want to take the pattern file, the one that's the biggest thing and it'll have the most pages. And I know because we're dealing with vintage and historical that like my e-patterns can be over 100 pages long sometimes. You want to make sure that you open that next. And you want to print the very first page. So when your dialog box comes up and it says your printing options, before you click print to scale, make sure you select to print the first page only. So it will say like, print all or print selected page. Make sure you just click the one that's print one page and print one page to 100%. Because I'm doing tutorials right now for this blouse, the Elsie blouse, which is a little bit old. Let's see, when did I make this one? 2014, so it's 4 years old as of the time I'm recording this. I'm using that one for an example. So this is the first page of the Elsie. And you can see that there are these boxes over here, 3 boxes. Each of these boxes, when you print this first page to test it, are 1 inch square. So to make sure that you were doing this correctly before you print all of your pages off, print this one page, take your clear ruler or whatever your seam ripper, whatever you're using, and overlap it, and you can see that those three boxes are each an inch. That's how I know my scale is correct. That's how I know that all pages are going to line up correctly. So that is the number one thing. I do need to do a little preface that I forgot to do. I get asked a lot if I have copy shop size patterns. I do not do copy size patterns at this time. There's a lot of reasons why. It's just kind of to protect my intellectual property from unscrupulous use. So I've heard stories of people running things off and selling work without having like a wholesale license. I'm trying to cover my butt, so I'm sorry if it frustrates you that you have to assemble all these letter size pages or A4 size pages, but this is really to help my family and my work so that we can keep paying our bills. So sorry guys, this is just what you got to do. And this is what most e-pattern companies do, so I mean it's just kind of what across the board standard that everybody does this. I know some people offer more, but at this time wearing history is just on US letter or A4 size paper. Okay, so when you buy your e-pattern, you're going to get it formatted so you can print it off at home. You don't have to run and pay at the copy shop to print off your stuff for you, because that can be really expensive too. It's always better to cut corners, and by cutting corners, you can print it off at home. So another thing that I want to mention about my e-patterns is, you see the way it's formatted here? There's a solid line, right? When you look at your e-pattern from me, where there's a solid line and not a dotted line, that's the outside border of the entire sheet. So when you tile your pages together, they'll go across and across and across, and once you find the other dark edge, you've reached the end of that row. So you can assemble them all together and then go, okay, this is row 1, and you can put it down. And then you can do it across from one solid line across to the other solid line. This is row 2, and you can put it down. Okay, so that kind of helps you guys to assemble things correctly. I also have these circles in the corners here. When you align mine together, the circles in the corners will all be matching up. So if there's a 4-page join, you will have a complete circle. Up here at the border, you can see that there's a solid line, so there's a half circle that will be completed at the solid line. So that helps you as well. Now you can't see it necessarily on these first couple sheets, but when you get down to like the 4th sheet of this pattern, do you see the really faint number 4 right here? I've numbered the pages so that you can make sure that you know what number page it is. So it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc., if it gets long. You know, if you've got a giant skirt, then it may be 10 pages wide. If you've got an average pattern, it's about 5 pages wide. So that should help you guys to keep your eye on what you're assembling. Now my newer e-patterns, I think I started doing this last year. The second page usually will have a layout. So you'll be like, okay, here's my tester page, and then there's page 1, and then page 2, you will have a little grid that will show what it should look like when it's all laid out correctly. So that's just an extra aid. Not all of my e-patterns have this, most of them don't, but it's something I added later on that I thought that if I was assembling it, it would be something that I would want to do. Now, in putting together my format, I kind of innovated this mostly myself. I had some help from Naomi with what she wanted for e-pattern. So between the two of us, Naomi is the dreamstress, I should say. So between the two of us, kind of bouncing things around, I came up with my order formula for what I would want when I assembled pieces, because I was like a late convert to e-patterns. I did not like e-patterns. Like, I started making them, but I'm like, what can I do so that these aren't so hard? So when I came up with my system, I was pretty happy with it, because now I can like throw them together pretty quickly. So back to it, let's pretend that I'm going to assemble my e-pattern. I have all my pages printed out right now, okay? So this one is quite big. I Actually, it's not that big. It's 30 pages. That's about average for like a smaller, like a blouse or something like that. Okay. So what you're going to need is a pair of scissors. I have these. They're gingers, but they're okay to use for paper because they are rusty and I inherited them. So don't use your fabric scissors. Don't use your good scissors. I am using an inherited pair of gingers. You're also going to need your tape. Extra points if you've got a kitty to have your tape in. And that's about it, really. I mean, your printed pages, your scissors, and your tape. So when you get ready to do it, you have the lines with the dots. You're going to cut away that border. So let me just do that real quick. So what I like to do is I like to do an L shape. So I will cut across, all the way across the bottom. And then I'll turn my scissors and I'll go all the way up the front. I've tried to do this with a like a paper cutter with a razor, you know, this kind that like, and like cuts everything. It didn't work for me. I didn't get it aligned very well. So I'm still like old school scissor girl, okay? So after you do it, you can see that I cut off the margin. If you're using A4 paper, it's going to look different for you than it does for me. And I think that my later patterns have a slightly different format so that they fit better on an international size. So if you're looking at this and you're like, my thing only comes to like here, it's not all the way across, that's okay. Like I did that one later on because it fit on more sizes of paper easier, but both should fit. And if you're having a problem, like if you're using A4 paper and you have a problem with printing it off where you can't see the dotted lines, the chances are that your printer margins are not set wide enough. Now, I don't know how to fix that problem myself. You're going to have to go into your printer manual and find out how to set your printer margins wider. Most printers are able to print. So just look in your printer manual or search online for your specific printer to see how the margins can be widened. Now the newer e-patterns, there shouldn't even be an issue with that. I made them extra narrow just to give a buffer for you guys that are international. But all should be able to be printed. You just need to figure out how to make your margins a slightly wider. I've never heard of anyone not being able to print their e-pattern. So after, let's say that I've got these 2 pages, let's say that I have my whole row and now I'm ready to align it. I have one, how do I do this? Sorry guys. One has the margin still, it's this one. You see there's still like a margin. This one I've cut off the margin. So I'm going to overlap those till the lines meet and I'm going to put a piece of tape right where that circle is. So let me do that. All right, and the dots should also line up when you do this. So I'll put a piece of tape right at the top. See how that looks? Now I put a piece of tape down at the bottom and I match up that circle. Okay, there you go. And now you can see that I don't want it to like wiggle around, right? Like I can put my hand through here. I tape where the pattern piece is. So I'll put a piece of tape there. I don't need a piece of tape up here because this is going to be cut away. I'm not going to even use this really afterwards. So I'm cutting this away and I'm going to tape where that is. Now if you're wondering what all this big text box is right here, this is me basically saying in this pattern, what the original size was based on. This was based on a historical pattern. You can look at my other videos to find more about this one because I'm going to record that next. But this specific pattern will tell you what the base size was in case you are curious about where the grading started. It's just for pattern nerds like me, okay? So you don't really have to worry about that. It's just like an extra additive that super geeky people like me want to know. So the other part of here will tell you about the original source material. So if it was based on a super old pattern, it might give you tips like, hey, you might want to do this. You might want to have this kind of a book handy in order to help you with construction because some patterns are a little more tricky than other patterns. But I always say, make a mock-up. That's on every pattern across the board. You want to test how things go together. You want to test how things fit. So one final note before I sign off, because I think this is pretty self-explanatory at this point. I do have a note on my e-patterns, and I would be really happy if you guys would pay attention to that. Please do not share your e-patterns with other people. This is how my family and I make our living. It's how we pay for things for my little girl. If your friend wants an e-pattern, that's awesome. Tell them to go to my website and buy one from me directly. All right, guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and it's been great talking to you. Okay, bye-bye.